this is a good idea. I don't think it's a good idea.
That's right.
So I mean, you can't just walk into the lawyer's office and say, "Here I am." I mean, at some point in time, I guess our clients become active participates in this.
Well, I think the client's always going to be working with
Sure.
the lawyer. You know, that's the ideal relationship.
Sure.
So that the client is informed as to exactly what the process is and what's going on. And quite simply, the information gathering aspect of the relationship is a very important part, because that's going to determine the following. Is bankruptcy right for you?
Sure.
What chapter should you file under? Should it be a Chapter 7 or should it be a Chapter 13? And all of those decisions are going to be made together with the client.
Okay.
And then after you make the determination that the filing is appropriate, then it's a question of actually filing the papers with the bankruptcy court. And here for Medina, Wadsworth, Portage counties, as well as Summit County, that court is centered in Akron, Ohio.
Yeah. That brings me to my next question, Kate. Why do bankruptcy proceedings, why are they filed in federal court as, let's say, rather than maybe Wadsworth Municipal Court? Why do they have to go to federal court? Somehow there's another idea, that concept that sometimes maybe scares people a little bit. Well, gee, I got to go to federal court. But what is the reason for bankruptcy per se being filed in a federal court versus a local court?
Well, because bankruptcy was created by Congress. Bankruptcy is a federal law.
Okay.
And so because it's a federal law, anything related to bankruptcy must be under the federal jurisdiction.
Okay.
So you can't go, it's not a state law. Now the states are permitted to determine what kind of exemptions there are if anybody files, but the United States of America really governs the law concerning
an act of Congress that all Americans are entitled to this.
Absolutely.
And I imagine by doing that, we have some guarantee that there is uniformity across the country then.
Absolutely.
Because we may live here in Wadsworth, Ohio, or Medina, but we have credit cards in our pockets that probably we have debtors or creditors from all over America.
That's right.
So that would make sense.
And the laws, you make a very good point, the laws are uniform throughout. The only difference, as I said, is each state is able to determine what kind of exemptions
sure.
the
state legislature does have, each state has some say in this.
And that's been granted by the federal government.
Sure. Okay, so that's going to be the perfect segue into the next question, which now we're really into the nuts and bolts, Kate. Who is eligible? What are the requirements?
Well, the people who are eligible to file bankruptcy are individuals as well as corporations, LLCs, partnerships, even municipalities can file bankruptcy. So there's really anyone is entitled to file. Some corporations are not permitted to file under Chapter 13.
Okay.
And so they're limited to either filing under Chapter 7 or Chapter 11.
What about an ordinary guy? I mean, does it make any difference that he makes $30,000 or $300,000 a year?
No, it does. Well, yes and no. They are eligible to file a bankruptcy if their assets are less in value than their debt, and also depending upon a means test calculation, assuming that they have only consumer debts as opposed to business debts, they might be relegated to file a Chapter 13 as opposed to a Chapter 7. But those are the kinds of questions that we answer in the process of doing our investigation or analysis at the time when the client comes in. But you asked earlier, we hear a Donald Trump maybe files. Well, maybe Donald Trump didn't file individually, but perhaps one of Donald Trump's companies may have filed.
I see.
And why is that? Well, the government wants to encourage entrepreneurship.
Sure.
So we want you to not be afraid to take your capital and invest it in a venture.
And there'd be some protection here.
That's right. And if the venture fails, then there's an ability or a schema to follow that would permit you to file a bankruptcy for that venture.
What you're describing, Kate, I mean, is General Motors and Chrysler.
Exactly.
Contemporary, current events here right now.
Exactly.
So that makes perfect sense. Kate, this idea of just talking about consumers, not necessarily the corporations, but you know, we have the option. If you mentioned a couple of times 7 or 13. I think it'd be good to revisit that just for a bit for the benefit of our viewers.
Okay.
Can you contrast or the two?
I can. Actually, an individual can also file a Chapter 11 under certain circumstances. A Chapter 7 bankruptcy is strictly, I guess the easiest way to explain that to the viewers is that at the time of the filing of the Chapter 7 bankruptcy, anything you own, any assets that you have, become property of the bankruptcy estate to be liquidated for the benefit of creditors. So that a trustee is appointed in a Chapter 7 that actually takes control of any assets you have and liquidates them for the benefit of creditors,
so
and pays off the creditors.
So when you're in bankruptcy, this trustee, and we'll talk about what trustee is in a few minutes, you actually have some personal knowledge about being a trustee, correct?
Yes.
But I mean, in layperson's terms, it is very possible then for that trustee to sell, I don't know if I want to say your car. I mean, if you had cars, you might be able to keep one. You have a classic car, that one could go on the block and the assets would go back into the state to pay creditors?
Well, simply put, yes.
Okay.
But there are other things, other rights you have. Remember that I said that you also are entitled to certain exemptions.
Yeah.
And so that even though you go into a Chapter 7 and a trustee has the right to control any assets you have, that's subject to the exemptions.
So they
can't take the exemptions.
So the car you're
for
driving
the exempt
around,
assets, right?
You know, so maybe the classic car that's sitting in your garage, that might be
something that a trustee would take
Sure,
over.
sure.
However, you also have a right to redeem, that is to be able to buy back that car.
back.
So let's say the car is worth $5,000. A trustee is more likely to allow you to keep the car and pay the $5,000 into the bankruptcy estate for the benefit of creditors. So you're not going to necessarily lose your assets.
Okay.
But all those things are discussed before you file, so you know going in, or should know going in, exactly what is going to happen.
This isn't about reorganization. This is pretty much about selling and keeping and trying to start all over again.
This is the proceeding that essentially allows you to move out, just get rid of your debt and start fresh.
Actually, 7's pretty common for individuals.
Very common. Very common.
You know, we see lawyers advertise for 7 all the time.
Right.
But the other one is a bit more complicated, though, isn't it? The 13.
Yes.
Well, what does that mean?
Okay, a 13 is really a reorganization of your financial affairs. In other words, many people go into a 13 where they have substantial income, but they have also some substantial debt. And you know, we talk about these small mom and pop businesses, and yet they want to keep their home. They maybe want to strip away their liens. Maybe they have tax debt. For example, it's not unusual for us to recommend a Chapter 13 where an individual may have some income tax debt or 941 employee tax debt that they cannot discharge. And so we put them through a 13 on a payment plan. And the beauty of that is that the penalties that the federal government charges with respect to your tax liability that's overdue, those penalties are treated as unsecured debt. And so there is a real benefit to the consumer in that not only do the penalties get treated as unsecured debt, but the interest that the government also charges stops.
This is going to be real significant then, because that's when people get in a tax problem, they just start falling deeper and deeper in the hole.
Exactly.
So it'll stop that part. And what are you saying? At some point in time, dollar for dollar on the repayment, they're able to pay what they owed to the government?
Yes, up to the point of the filing, the taxes and the interest they're able to pay dollar for dollar.
I see.
Assuming that you qualify in a 13 and assuming
Sure, I understand.
that there's an ability to pay, because in order to file a Chapter 13, there has to be a feasibility aspect to
Yeah,
it.
you gotta
That
have
is,
a
you've got to
job,
be
you have
able to
some
have
money
a
coming in,
job
sure.
and have some money and be able to make payments.
How long, Kate, when you get into 13, how long are you protected for?
Well, Chapter 13, you're doing a plan for 3 to 5 years.
3 to 5 years.
Right.
Okay. Now, I was going to ask you the $64,000 question. What's a trustee?
Before I answer that,
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
let me just comment on that.
Go ahead.
In the Chapter 13, the protection to the individuals are that at the time of the filing, there's what's called an automatic stay that goes into effect, and that protects everybody from creditors coming after you.
So that's
and during the life of the plan, and they have to agree to the plan. I mean, the plan is adopted and confirmed, and then the creditors cannot object once a plan is adopted and confirmed. So they don't have to be worried.
Stay. I mean,
stay means stay, and they don't
have to worry. The
creditor
calls will stop.
Right.
Okay.
Exactly.
But this person who comes into the life of an individual who files trustee or files bankruptcy is called a trustee.
Right.
Okay, and that's probably one very important person when you find yourself in this situation. I take it a trustee is somehow employed by the United States government?
A trustee is appointed through the United States Trustee's Office, which oversees all the trustees in this Tri-County area, and then actually in the Northern District of Ohio. And that is through Washington.
Okay.
So
this person, albeit man or woman, steps into the life of our litigants who have filed. And they will literally be making decisions about selling the property of the filer?
They will be making decisions with respect to administering the assets of the bankrupt estate. Okay, and again, keep in mind that this is not necessarily out of the control of the debtor. Going into the bankruptcy, the debtor is fully aware of exactly, or should be fully aware exactly, what is going to be happening. Okay, in terms of the chapters. So you may have a piece of property that has equity that you don't want anymore because you're moving to Wisconsin. Sure. And so you're perfectly happy to have a trustee take it over and sell it. And then any deficiency, and this is a very important point to be made to your viewers, any deficiency on the sale, it does not come back to the debtor. It doesn't come back to the person who filed bankruptcy, because they're going to be that debt is going to be resolved, basically, and they're going to be discharged of the debt.
Kate, I can't believe the time went as fast as it did.
I can't either.
But I think it serves a purpose, and you have a standing invitation to come back anytime you want. Okay. But in these troubled financial times, you've certainly made the point that this is an option that people should look at, and the negativity that goes along with it may be balanced out. Don't worry about it, folks. Sit down with a professional, find out. This might be better than credit counseling in a lot of ways, because you're going to walk away from it understanding overall, and don't exhaust all your resources.
Well, before you make the decision, you should explore.
Absolutely. Well, Kate, we thank you for being our guest today at on Law Talk. For the benefit of our viewers, if you'd like to see this episode of Law Talk again, go to our website at www.czclep.org. I am John Celebrezze, and thank you for viewing Law Talk today.
To keep up on Medina County and other legal issues, go to www.czcourtreporter.com, a function of the Celebrezze-Zangi Community Legal Education Project. At CZ-CLEP, we're devoted to the education of today's legal issues. Fueled by the public's keen interest in our legal system and current events, CZ-CLEP is dedicated to the educational venues aimed at enhancing the understanding by all citizens. For a complete listing of dates and times for this telecast, tune in to WCTV Channel 15. or log on to wadsworthcity.com and follow the links to WCTV.
I'm John Celebrezze. Please join me in getting a better understanding of the law.